Hi, everyone. This is Bob McGinley. I recently had the opportunity to sit down with Kevin Bernstein of Software One. Kevin is the global practice leader for Microsoft Copilot and generative AI at Software One. He's probably one of the thought leaders that I would turn to for latest trends, tips and tricks for doing everything from prompt engineering to using AI in a studio platform, agents and actions, which we'll talk about here as well. Just a really good thought-provoking conversation around what's going on with AI, what are some of the challenges, what are some of the implications, and what's coming up in the near future and what we should be expecting in a couple of years. So I hope you get a lot out of the conversation. I had a blast doing it with Kevin, and I'm really looking forward to the next time we can catch up, and I hope you enjoy. Before we kick off the next podcast, I want to introduce you to our newest sponsor, Sutra. Sutra.co is a conversational learning platform focused on delivering engaging, interactive learning experiences. It supports creators and educators in building courses that emphasize community, dialogue, and co-creation. Think of it like this. You've taken online courses before. You probably did it somewhat in isolation. You go through all the course material. You don't really have any interaction with the other people in the course. Sutra flips all of that on its head. So instead of taking the course by yourself, alone, not sharing your experience, Sutra changes all that by letting you interact with all the other people taking the course, learning from them, contributing back to the group, and developing a peer-to-peer network or expanding your network so that you can actually make more connections while you're going through the course. It's a whole new way of learning. I find this to be really something for me. I get much more out of the engagement and the interaction by going through it with other people. If you're interested in using Sutra to develop your own educational material, you can sign up using the Tech Leads promotion code, the Tech Leads 10, and you'll get 10% off of your account. If you have any questions about Sutra as a platform, developing course material, or if you want to talk to us about what our experience was, please reach out and we'll be happy to share our insights. All right, Kevin Bernstein, welcome to the Tech Leads podcast today. Great to have you, my friend. So, you and I just, let's, get it all out there, right? You and I are friends. We've been friends for a couple of years now. We worked together at Software One for the last couple of years. We talked, I think, last week and decided, it'd be a good opportunity to get together, chat, and talk about some of the really cool stuff you're doing with AI and large language models. And I just wanted to kind of jump back into your career a little bit about your background, and talk about how you kind of got into this role and then what you've discovered a little bit.
Yeah, and like you said, yeah, we are friends, and friends are friends when I keep your cup for a year.
Inside story, yeah.
Right, exactly. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. I mean, really, this is awesome. As soon as you said to do this, I'm like, oh, of course. All right. By background, I've got kind of an interesting background and got to where I am through a lot of twists and turns. So technically, on my technical side of the house, I've done a lot technically. I've done everything from cabling wires, and I've got punch down tools on my desk, all the way through. I was a chief technology officer in the financial industry for just about 9 years. So I've been the signer of contracts. I have been the implementer of systems and cloud migrations. I've done all of that on the technical side. The other half of me, though, my actual education and degrees are in family therapy and psychology. I actually practiced for a number of years. Co-owned a substance abuse clinic, met with patients, and I've even taught psychology in the California State University system.
Wow.
So what you do, you take both of those two things together, right, which is technology and people, and you bring them together, and that got me onto the path of change management. Because in technology, I used to say that 50% of all technical implementations involve people. Well, now AI has changed that story. AI is now 70 to 80%. We need people engagement in order to usher in this era of AI. And I feel like my skill set is just perfectly timed now. It's the culmination of two sides of a pretty storied career to now work in this field, and I'm grateful for it every day. And I don't know if you can tell, but I kind of love what I do.
Yeah, I've kind of picked up on that. But when I started at Software One 3 years ago, you were the change management guy. We met up in Seattle having pizza one night. And that was kind of you owned that practice really in Software One, and then something changed, right? What was it on your career arc that kind of got you moving towards AI and the large language model? Because you weren't like it wasn't like the company set you up to go that way. You kind of picked it up on your own. So tell me about what happened there and how you transitioned.
Yeah, exactly. So being on that team and being in that leadership role of change management, like I said, it's all about implementation. We want to get business value out of every technology project. But then November 20th, I think it was 2022, is when I started learning about ChatGPT. And immediately, I was like day one chomping at the bit to be able to log into ChatGPT as soon as it was available, and I did. I got in on day one. And the first thing I did was I did a simple question to it, and the simple response came back, and I said to myself, hold on a second. This is truly a transformative moment, and this is going to change everything for everybody. And I didn't take that, that thought wasn't just like a light thought. Like, I really was diving in deep on this, and I realized that the biggest problem that we're going to have, and the biggest problem that I don't care if it's Google, Microsoft, AWS, the biggest problem in implementation is going to be, again, looking at the people side of this. Yeah. So the first thing I did was I started doing what I do with change management, getting excited, building a team of people around me, and getting people really interested. And then even after the first month of ChatGPT, I would talk to people within Software One. They would say, "Chat, what is this?" And people didn't know. I then drafted a proposal of how Software One can actually implement at scale Copilot. Now, keep in mind, Copilot hadn't even come out yet.
Right.
But I literally, I was on my way to a meeting in London, and I literally, on the plane, I drafted like a 17-page proposal, including the service offering, the approach, the go-to-market, everything of how we can do that. And then I spoke with my leader at the time, who was no longer with the company, who said, we are too early for this. It's not coming out. We're too early. We need to focus on what's happening today. And you know what? You know me, right? Like, I don't take no for an answer. Like, I'm just going to keep going. So I kept building and building and building. And then I brought all this information over to our Microsoft COE. We presented that to Microsoft. They were kind of blown out because the reality is people were saying, hey, Microsoft, tell us about Copilot. And me and Software One went to them and said, here's what we're going to do for Copilot. Yeah. And that changed the game. It changed everything for me and for the company. We're literally sitting in the room with Microsoft. I live in Seattle, so I've literally been in the room having the meetings before Copilot came out, and it's been quite the adventure, to be honest. Like I said, I love this. I love this topic. I love the combination of people and technology, the responsibility factor, the enablement factor, the transformative factor. All of it just checks every box for my life mission. I just love it.
Yeah. So fast forward then to what was it last? The summer of 2023. I think you and I were at an SMB conference with Microsoft in Dallas, and there was a room full of Microsoft salespeople and leaders. And I sat in the back of that room and watched you basically teach everyone from Microsoft how to use Copilot and what it was really good for. So just tell me about that. How did that, like you almost jumped the shark a little bit with the Microsoft guys and got better at their product than they were already being enabled for, right?
So that's interesting. So I've been called upon as an expert panelist, both in Copilot and in security, for Copilot security at Microsoft events, from the SMB event to the GPS events. That particular event, there were 800 people in the room and I think another 400 online. And in reading the room, whenever I get ready to go on stage, I don't actually plan. I kind of know what I'm going to talk about, but I'm going to read the room.
Yeah.
And in reading the room, I realized pretty quickly that everyone still has this very technical approach here. It's let's focus on the license. Let's focus on on getting that kind of traction, and again, the technology approach. And I wanted to be different. So on that particular day, and I can't believe I'm recalling this now, I had to engage them in a certain way. I had to get their attention, because at these events, and you've been to a lot of them, a lot of it's kind of like, okay, I've heard the same thing over and over again, and nobody's really memorable. I'm not sure what the key takeaways are. So I started out by asking the crowd what day it was, if anybody knew the significance of the date. And it was kind of weird, but the reality is it was Azure's 14th birthday on that particular day. And I got the crowd like, wait a second, hold on, is that true? Is it really Azure's birthday? And then I said, if you have Copilot on your phone, like, look it up, it's Azure's birthday, right? So that's how I actually got their attention. And then, I gave them a little bit of an education, if you will, about what this actually means, and what the transformative aspect of it. And selling it it's so much more than just selling a license. So engaging the audience. And then when we did the other expert panels in the room, again, my colleagues from other companies just like ours, they were going again down a very technical path. And I believe that that's one of the things that's going to be changing here in 2025, is that there will be less of a focus on technology and more of a focus on what to do with the technology.
Yeah. So then just give me a synopsis of where you kind of see things right now, right? So, now we're a couple of years after this has all kind of gotten out. I think we're still, I don't know that we're even at the peak of the hype curve yet, right? So everyone's kind of jumping on the bandwagon. Now you've got multiple companies. I saw the Anthropic got valued at some crazy number the other day. In the tens of billions of dollars because of Claude, their implementation of the large language model. Everyone's using. Everyone's now attached AI to their company name, right? If you don't have AI in in your company description, you don't really exist. So it's full blown hype mode, and I'm typically always the cynic in the game, right? So to me, it's search engine 2.0, right? It's really good at doing certain things. And we talked about this last week, right? That I was doing a bunch of work with images and trying to get ChatGPT to create some really cool graphics for me, and I discovered that ChatGPT can't spell, right? At least on the DALL-E image creation part of it. So I would get these images, and I was like, that's a great image, but all the words are spelled incorrectly, and then they were askew, and they weren't aligned correctly. So there's a part of me that's like, all right, this is all really good, and it's I see the benefit. It's nice to be able to go and just generate a blog and kind of spit out information from multiple different sources. I don't have to go kind of navigate to multiple websites. So that's kind of why I say it's search engine 2.0, is like it kind of condenses what is in the websites itself, and then puts it out into a format that's legible and you can reuse, right? But I still always find that even if I'm generating some stuff out of it, I've got to go back in and do some level of editing and kind of make it my own. I can't really just copy and paste it. It's almost I think I've kind of picked up on it a lot, especially because in my new role, I'm getting all these cold outreach emails, and I can tell right away when they're AI generated, right?
Yeah,
so
sure.
You can kind of see through it. So just tell me what you think on where we are, and then we can talk about the transition into the people side of things.
Okay, so this is actually what people is connected here. This is the first problem, is that, there's a new technology on the scene, and people automatically thought, this is just like a search engine. And it is the quintessential amplified by a factor of 100 garbage in, garbage out system.
Yeah.
If you ask it a garbage question, you will get a garbage answer. And therein lies the first problem. we expect to use it as a search engine. It's not the best search engine in the world, honestly. Right? If we ask it, if we expect that kind of a response, and then our first our first impression is not good, right? Oh, this thing's garbage, it doesn't work, didn't give me the answer I was looking for. Maybe that's not the system, maybe it's the question that you asked. Maybe it's how you asked it. Maybe it's how you interacted with it and the learning curve. So that's just one thing I want to point out. Another is that if you look at how far we've gone from, Copilot's 1 year old, it's just a year.
Yeah.
As a year old, how fast things have changed in one short year. Now that's just a Copilot story. Of course, it's Claude and it's everybody else. Right? They're all doing the same thing. Look at the speed and pace of innovation in that year. So what happened was a lot of companies, CIOs, CTOs, CFOs, CEOs, a lot of companies, all the C-suite, they looked at it when it first came out and said, I don't need it to write an email for me.
Yeah.
And then they didn't look at it again. Or if they did look at it, they're not giving it the look that it needs. But here's the interesting thing that's happening, okay? And again, I'm gonna blend the people side with the technical side.
Yeah.
The interesting thing here is that you have a workforce that is aware of a technology. This is the first time it's been like this, where a workforce is then pushing organizations to say, I want access here. I want to use it. I want to learn about it. I know this is the future. Teach me. Then we have organizations that are saying, whoa, hold on a second. We don't know about this. We don't trust it. We're not sure where to go. We don't want to enable you and help you. Right? Yep. We're not going to tell you that, but the reality is you've got this push-pull in an organization. And the third factor is I've had experiences where C-suite says, hey, I met somebody on an airplane. They're into this particular technology. Let's go ahead and implement it. Get it done tomorrow. That's happened to me, literally.
Yeah.
But here, so we have the C-suite that's sort of resistant in some ways. They don't know the right path forward. We have the legal department that says, yeah, we actually like to use this thing, but we're not sure about the organization. Then you have the organization saying we need to use it. And then you have all the competition that's moving faster than they are.
Right.
This is an interesting push-pull dynamic all around. If companies, to your point, if companies aren't attaching AI into their marketing or into their name, they're not relevant. But another factor here is AI is the great leveler. It's leveling the playing field.
Yep.
If we have a large behemoth organization that is slow to adopt, but you have, look at an article I read this morning about all the stuff that's coming, all the startups out of Silicon Valley right now that are jumping all over agents and actions. You have more nimble companies are being able to impact this faster to market than the bigger ones. And now what that means is you have small companies that can now compete on a level of the large companies. And it's not been like this before.
Yep.
There's been a large separation between the behemoth and the small. And now that has been leveled out.
And then, because you're in an interesting position with Copilot just because, Copilot's a little bit different for me because it's got access to all the family jewels, right? So
exactly.
So you've got everything in SharePoint. You've got all the applications sitting there. You've got all the data sitting up on Azure, and that and that's kind of, I remember going through the first cycles of Copilot running out. That was the big fear. It's like, well, we can't let this thing access all of our data because then we don't know who's running the prompt, who's getting access to our financials. So just, and you mentioned security being a big aspect of this at the beginning because, some of the use cases I've seen in the last couple of months, that's the big tie-in as well, right? Is that, companies are creating these agents and they've got some proprietary data in there that they've trained the model on. But then they want other companies to come in and allow their private data to be ingested, but they don't want it to be pulled into the larger model, right? It's like, so you have to almost segment off part of the model to be able to deal with my stuff and protect it from everything else.
Right. So let's get to that for a second. So yeah, security is one of the. To me, there's three core elements here. One is you engage your audience, right? You engage everybody in creating a culture of AI.
Yeah.
While you're doing that, we focus on security and you focus on the technical aspects. All this has to happen simultaneously. This isn't a 1, 2, 3 sequential event.
Yeah.
When it comes to security, this isn't necessarily a Microsoft commercial, but I'm going to insert a little bit of a Microsoft commercial right now. One of the benefits of using Copilot in that ecosystem is that it's all connected to the graph. And any information you have that you have access to already will be surfaced to Copilot. It's not like we drop Copilot into the company and Copilot magically finds everything. It will give you access to what you have access to. So if you are a user level and that's your security setting, and your administrators have already put it out there that this is what you have access to, that's all it's going to action on. It's going to surface that information. However, here's the other side of that story. Being in IT for as many years as I've been, I know for a fact that things have been swept under the rug for a long time. In other words, maybe security isn't exactly where it should be. Maybe we had some plans we didn't quite finish out, right? And maybe there's some data out there that's kind of hanging that maybe someone should have access to. The reality is, Copilot's not going to go hunt that out and say, there it is. It's going to sort of amplify the deficiencies or things that haven't been done. So in any implementation, I strongly suggest you start small, you start with small pilot groups, and we start doing some testing. Now, this particular quarter with Microsoft, they have the new SharePoint services is coming out, whereby we're able to look at and be able to manage oversharing and that sort of thing. So that's another element. Again, a very quick evolution of being able to help security. But to your other point of training the model, when you are working within the graph, and it's a web of information, right? You've got Outlook, you've got Teams, you've got all the Microsoft suite. It's a web. When you are interacting with Copilot's interacting with that web, that's yours. You are not training the Microsoft model. Copilot keeps it all at tenant level.
Yeah.
You are not training the model. They have a legal guarantee of this. We are not training the model. But when we have an organization where you haven't given people guidance of how to use things, and they bring in other chatbots or other AIs, you don't know what's happening.
Right.
Shadow AI is real. Shadow AI is a fact. It is a fact of life, and it changes the attack surface and the security landscape that we have to look at. But by encouraging everybody to pick a lane and then develop and enable and promote, right, that is where the security is. Now, that's only for today. Because right now, we are in the phase of, you said where we are in the hype cycle, we're in the phase of people have to understand and how to learn how to use something. But 2025 is going to be the year of agents. So think of it this way. You could use Copilot or ChatGPT or whatever to help you build a travel itinerary, right? I mean, that's kind of cool. An agent will then be able to book everything for you, right? You see the difference?
Yeah.
One of them is like sort of search engine-esque, right? Help me build this and help me get some information. I'm going to ask it a whole bunch of questions. I'm going to do some good prompting. Then the action is going to do that. And then an agent, after it's booked, an agent will be able to modify things automatically or notice automatically, hey, your itinerary changed. You should pay attention to this.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah. So we're still in our infancy, even though this is the dominant conversation, we are still in the infancy. We are in a stage where it's still highly dependent on people being able to interact and ask it the right questions and do prompt engineering. But I predict that prompt engineering will disappear within 2-3 years. That's just my prediction. See if I'm right. Let's check back with each other 2-3 years.
Yeah.
Prompt engineering is going to fall to the background, and I think agents and actions are going to take over, and there will be a better way of interfacing with the large language model. Because one of the problems with prompt engineering is it's highly dependent on the person asking the question. And I don't know if you know this, but not everybody asks questions in the same way.
Yeah.
I know it's shocked to hear that, right? But then when we ask it different questions in different ways, the results might be less predictable. So agents will help fix that.
Interesting.
So we're in a bridge area right now.
Yeah, and then the other thing that I'm kind of picking up on as well, and you kind of highlighted this with your optical illusion posts a couple weeks ago, right? Is that, and I've seen it with some of the work we've been doing with some of the models, is that they all provide kind of different results, right? So that there actually is some level of differentiation between the various models that are out there, and some perform better in certain workloads than others, right? And I'm just curious where all that kind of pans out. Do they, do some, how do they get aligned, right? Do they align to certain industries or certain types of data? I'm just curious where you think, like, you know, who rises to the top, and then what's the criteria for, you know, how they're going to be seen as, you know, better, right?
Right. So what we're talking about, just to state it, is that I took an optical illusion, and maybe we can share a link on that on the post. But I took an optical illusion, and I asked 5 different AIs to interpret the illusion. And the illusion was basically, to look at it, it looked like the outside of a garage door. It's a bunch of rectangles.
Squares, yeah.
And it's squares and rectangles, right? And then the trick is to look at that illusion and see how many circles do you see. Now, when I first read about this optical illusion, I'm like, okay, hold on, how many circles are there? I looked at it and I didn't see any circles right away. I'm like, well, hold on. And I'm looking, I'm like, oh wow, there's actually 4 circles. No, first I saw 1, then it was 4, then it was 8, then it was 16. There's 16 circles in this illusion. So I took that image, because now AI can actually see, right? It's got the visual content. It can look at an image and do some interpretation. And Copilot, if I have my numbers right, I think it said 15, and then I asked it again and it said 16. And then it identified it as the correct type of optical illusion. And then I went down the line, I asked ChatGPT, and I asked Claude and a few others all about it, and some of them couldn't identify any circles. Some said that, and it completely got the number wrong. And it's a fascinating, almost unfair, although very fair experiment, because it really illustrated the capability difference of the LLMs to be able to identify an image. So think about it. If you are working in medical, right, and you're using an LLM to interpret an X-ray or interpret a CT scan or an MRI, you want to make sure it's pretty accurate, correct?
Yeah.
Right? Like you have to make sure it's correct. So back to your question though, about where this is going. By illustrating the difference, by illustrating that someone better than others, isn't to point out deficiencies and flaws in the language models. It's to make the point that we, first of all, A, have a responsibility to really be able to interpret the data that we get out. B, we can't necessarily rely 100% on some of the public LLMs, and this goes to what you said just now. I believe the future is going to be more small models as opposed to the large models. On a small language model, you are able to interpret and train on that data. Instead of training and using a large language, I know it's not fair to say about CT scans, but I'm going to go there anyway. Anybody who's building a CT scanner on a public LLM, that's not cool. Right? But you want to be able to train it on actual, like data. If you're looking for cancer, then it better be trained on that kind of a small set of data. But the same is true with everything else. I believe that the large language models will continue to evolve, but the small language models are what's going to actually drive business and innovation. If you think about a small language model, whatever your industry is, it doesn't matter. I don't care if you're making widgets. I don't care if you're whatever it is. By having a smaller data set to be able to train and look for, then you're going to get more predictable responses.
Yeah.
And I really believe it's going to shift down toward more of the small language. And as a matter of fact, again, back to Microsoft Copilot, when you are interacting with Copilot, you have the ability to turn off web searching.
Yeah.
So you can set it so that you're only having the interpretation on the data set that's in front of you and not being influenced by the web, which would cut down on the magical hallucinations they talk about. And I have an interesting comment about hallucinations too, if you're interested.
Oh yeah, I certainly am. But you just got me thinking on a kind of a tangent, because I did a lot of work with, there's a couple, almost like competition websites out there for AI and machine learning. One of them is called Kaggle, right? If you've ever played around with them, and there was that medical imaging competition, and it was looking for like collapsed lungs and how many thousands of images, and it was using the winning technologies were convolutional neural networks, right? So CNNs. Right. So it's kind of got me thinking, like, is there going to be some condensation of these technologies where you start combining things into the larger language models where, there's like there's machine learning and there's the AI component, the probability matrix, right? That really is behind the the large language model technology, and where you start to see the ability for the large language model to kind of use other capabilities, right, almost at that agent level, to go, and it's like, all right, this is an image. So, instead of not being able to see those circles in the optical illusion, right, I actually can see them very well because I integrate like a CNN type of technology to break those things apart into smaller pieces and see them mathematically, right?
Correct. And I think what you're alluding to more is more like the actual general AI that's coming into the future.
Yeah.
What's going to happen is right now we're at a phase where I do believe that we need to do model comparison, just like with the circle images, right? We can't rely on one model for everything. And I believe, and I know that, again, in Microsoft land, you can do this, with Studio, is that you can point things at different models, even outside of Microsoft, to be able to do this. You want to do comparisons. You want to do compare and contrast. You want to try to do, especially in something like medical, you want to be able to have probabilities and then have the human interpreted from there.
Right.
But overall, I do believe that, it's going to be about converging. Like I said, there's going to be a convergence. It's going to go down to smaller models, and then you're going to be able to do comparisons based on that. I mean, right now, someone here at Software One, David, working in our BIT, he did an interesting experiment on the heels of what I did with the circles. He took a picture of his hand and asked how many fingers, and the language models couldn't identify correctly. They couldn't all identify correctly how many fingers he had, right? So, but that doesn't mean that it's bad. Right. And here's the thing, back to what you said earlier about Google. It's a search engine, garbage in, garbage out. I didn't like it, and I'm not going to use it. Same thing here. If somebody says, hey, I don't like the way it's doing image interpretation, this thing is terrible, we're not going to do this, we're going to go back to the way we did. It just because the experience may not have been what you expected the first time, doesn't mean that there's not an evolution path here. Because there's so much more that we can do. And you're right, it's going to be about models interacting with models. It's going to be about agents interacting with different models. And it's going to converge back so that we have better intelligence on the image. I know we're only talking about images right now, but better intelligence and better telemetry and better everything about image interpretation. It's going to keep getting better. And if you look how fast it's changed in just 1 year, look at the next 3 months of how fast it's going to change. The pace of change has never been that fast. Yeah,
I mean, it really is. It's just every day the news is, just like the next crazy thing that people are doing with the stuff. So, and
I literally read every morning. I spend an hour reading news about AI, actually in quantum too, but every day I read what's going on around the world in this field.
Yeah.
Every day.
Yeah, I mean, that's the cool thing about the technology like this, right? Is that there is news on it every day, and just what the CEO of NVIDIA said the other day about quantum, right? I mean, it's just he sunk every quantum stock in the world just by saying it's it's a dead technology for 15 years, right?
That's right. That's exactly right. But then the other side of that coin is there was also an impact on NVIDIA shares as well, because all of a sudden, we're living in a very interesting time when it comes to this. But I want to get back to hallucinations for a second. About 2 years ago, I wrote an article about hallucinations, and I maintained, everyone said hallucination was the big boogeyman in the room. It was, we can't use these models because they make things up and they hallucinate. My point then is being validated now. My point then was, I think hallucinations can be good. I think hallucinations are, there's two reasons why I think somebody hallucinates. One is because we asked it the wrong question and it's trying to fill in an answer, right? That's one way. Or the other way is the way I use AI is I say to it literally, use your imagination to help me do X.
Ah, interesting.
I actually want it to hallucinate. And when it comes to my prediction a year ago was that when it comes to like pharmaceutical industry and new drug discovery, I want AI to hallucinate. Because if AI is going to fulfill the need or fulfill the dream of being better than the human mind, it recognizes patterns and does things faster than we can, right? It does. The reality is I want it to dream a little bit. There was a book, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? Which really got me thinking about this. I want AI to hallucinate.
Yeah.
And I just read an article, a couple articles yesterday and the day before that that the pharmaceutical industry is actually leaning into AI hallucinations because it's discovering things that the human mind isn't really even understanding yet. We're catching up to it.
Yeah.
So that's a hallucination is another one of those words where I hear CEOs and I hear executives say, no, they hallucinate, it's not reliable. You know what? It all depends on what your size, scale, and scope is.
Right.
Hallucinations are exactly what you need.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, again, being the cynic in the room most of the time, it's the word hallucinate that kind of gets me. It's like it's an error, right? But even I go back to the search engine analogy. Sometimes the errors you get back from the search are the thing that you're really looking for, right? So, I think it just correlates into that same level of discussion is like, just how are you coming up with these results? And, the word hallucination is, I think a little, I don't know. For me, it's a little confusing. Well, and you're the guy coming from recovery practice in the past, right? So
yeah, exactly. I literally to my ex-partner, I literally did this. But again, to the point. Now, maybe hallucinate was the harsh word that the industry picked up on because that was, again, the resistance. That's whoa, I don't want to do this. It hallucinates. No, I call it dreaming. It dreams.
Yeah.
And I want it to dream. But when it comes to the fact of garbage in, garbage out, think about it this way: if somebody out there that's listening to this cast has ever had a medical condition that's serious, one of the first things you do is you go online, you go trolling the internet trying to find something, right? There's this thing called confirmation bias. Everything's available on the internet to fit whatever your bias is. If you're convinced that you have a major medical condition, I guarantee you'll find a website and information out there that'll convince you that you have that medical condition.
All right.
If you want to say that you don't, and you look and you'll find things that say you don't, right? It all depends on your bias. And this is where it gets really interesting when it comes to AI. Bias is such a big thing here. Confirmation bias, information bias. We have to interpret what we're getting back. If we take something back, let's say we're using AI to write an email to somebody, back to what you said earlier.
Yeah.
And you can identify that it's AI, right? You know it. If we are just saying to AI, write this email for me and sending it, then that person shouldn't be working anymore.
Yeah.
They shouldn't be in their role, right? It is still up to the human. At this point of AI's evolution, it is up to us to look at that data, look at that output, interpret it through our own biases and through our own information, and be able to make it our own.
Yeah.
You mentioned the newsletter. I don't use AI to write my newsletters. I don't.
Yeah.
All my newsletters are authentic. They are based on personal experience and inspiration. Here's how I do use it, though. A hint to everybody out there. I use Microsoft OneNote to do dictation. I stopped typing. I had a thumb injury years ago, and I kind of stopped typing my stories. So I speak my stories into dictation, right? So it does a dictation, not a recording of my voice, but it does an active dictation. Now, it doesn't always get it right. Its spelling is wonky, punctuation's wonky, that kind of thing. I then have my story, I give it a quick read, and then I say to AI, take this story, and the prompt that I use is pretty simple. Don't change any of my content, correct my spelling and punctuation, separate my thoughts into logical paragraphs, and add section headers.
Oh my God.
So now I've taken my dictation, and now I've created a story, right?
Yeah.
And then I go back and read it and go, I have no idea why it decided, it dreamed too much. I have no idea why I decided to use that heading, so I changed that heading. So what I do is I then take a reread. Normally, it would take me, I'm going to say 3-4 days of editing to go through and really get a story out there. And now I'm able to do it in an hour or two.
Wow.
I have the idea, I dictate it, and then I use a simple prompt to be able to generate that.
Yeah.
Simple.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing because, and I did a podcast a couple months ago with a company that's into marketing, and that was, the whole theme of the podcast was, the credibility of the stuff that's being generated, right? And and how authentic is it? And I think, for me, we talked about this a little bit earlier, but I can pull up. It's just my brain triggers real quick when I see some of the outreach emails, or I see, some of the blog posts. They're almost difficult to read at this point, right? It's like,
exactly.
And because you can just tell they're just not authentic. That they don't relate back to a story. It's not personal, and it's got this generality to it that you can kind of see. The more I read them, the quicker I see through it, right? And the quicker I tend to distract myself with something else. So it's really, I think it's almost a shame, because it's making people, to me, it's a little bit of cheating, I would say, but I like your approach, right? To be able to go and actually write something and then just have it kind of organize your thoughts. And that's, something that I've been doing. And, let's hype your newsletter for a second, because I want to encourage everyone to go read it. And I'm going to put a link in the, both on the LinkedIn page and then on below all of the videos, both on YouTube and the other sites. We'll post it. So,
thank you.
Yeah. And then, for me, I've been doing work with Sutra. So Sutra is a learning management system that integrates like social learning and conversations into the learning process. And I've been trying to use AI as well to kind of organize my thoughts about how do you develop a course and course material for, building, the theme I'm working on is in asymmetric business, right? So
right.
A business that kind of plays on the outside a little bit and doesn't really go down the same course of everyone else. You kind of, you look for opportunities in areas where other people aren't really looking for them, right? And, how do you find that area? And AI has actually been really good at helping me organize my thoughts and kind of, put things in a way that I can then fill in the gaps with my, my unique writing ability. And so the authenticity of that writing, I think, comes through a lot bit more when you kind of use it in that way.
Yeah, exactly. So 2 quick things. One about the newsletter. I just want to go back to that for a second. Like I said, everything in there is authentic and real. And as a fair warning to everybody watching this, it takes a commitment. It's about a 10 or 15 minute read. These aren't just quick 2-minute newsletters. They're stories. And they're to take you on a journey. And that's one of the things that I just love doing, is taking people on a journey. And the reason why I keep doing it is because of all the feedback that I keep getting from everybody saying, please don't stop. But down to your point, to be able to interact with AI, to be able to work with it for idea generation, again, all depends on how you are asking it the question. If you are looking for something that is more, let's say a novel approach to training, use that example you just said.
Yeah.
To be able to say to it, ground it and say, I am an expert in all things training people, and you, meaning the AI, are the expert in training people of how to do X. Like, really give it some parameters. And then say to it, I want to create a new course or a new thing about again, something. Ask me 3 or 4 questions for clarity before we get going, just to make sure we're on the same page.
Oh.
And it'll ask you questions, and you can. I've even prompted it to say, keep asking me questions until I say stop. And sometimes the questions are like, oh, great, I don't know what you're doing. Like, stop it already. Like, shut up. Like, stop asking me these questions. Right. At the same time, it helps me hone in on my idea. And then you can say, okay, now that we understand each other, tell me a novel way to approach this that no one's ever thought of before. Use your imagination.
Oh, interesting. So tell me more about this, because this is where the other thing that I think you've really differentiated yourself is you've almost become the tips and tricks guy for, getting really good information out of these models. So, I think that's one of the things that you've really gotten good at, is how do you, we call it prompt engineering and, that type of stuff. And, I've never thought of actually asking the model to ask me the questions. That's really insightful, right? So,
turn it around.
So what other little things do you that are, I don't want to steal the thunder from your newsletter, but, what other things have you kind of come across that, or different ways to kind of to use the technology that other people haven't really started using it?
Well, again, I think it's just a matter of how to interact with it. you look back at, so again, not to steal the thunder of what I do, but I'll reference another post that I put out there just before this last Christmas, which was a holiday survival guide. I think I called it the Family Holiday Survival Guide. And I posted the prompt on LinkedIn. You simply take the prompt and you put it in there, right? Yeah. and it'll ask you questions of, tell me about your family. Tell me what their dynamic is. It says help me build a survival guide, and it literally asks you questions about family dynamics, who you like to talk to, who you don't like to talk to, and after it gets that stuff, it'll give you a customized output to help you.
Wow.
So think about that as the example. Now, granted, it's a little tongue in cheek about, a family survival guide, but think about the implications of this moving forward. Think about how students can be able to learn instead of having the AI produce something for them. Think about using it as a true conversation partner or a true companion.
Oh,
right?
Yeah.
It's not just about an LLM guiding the human of what we want it to do. Its role is to learn about you, to give results that are for you.
Yeah.
And I think this is an area where it's not being tapped into. A lot of industries are really good at, we're doing the marketing thing, we're doing the legal thing, we're doing all of that. We're getting information, but to actually guide and have it understand, that's up to us at this point.
Huh.
Have it coach you. Have it ask you questions about what it is you're actually trying to do. I have used it for idea generation.
Yeah.
And the idea generation, none of that makes it into my newsletters as far as like the words it gives me. But sometimes it gives me a track I hadn't thought about. Okay, I'm writing a newsletter about this. Ask me some questions and give me some insight because, again, you're the expert in it. I'm not. I'm learning from you kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it'll start literally asking you the questions.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the applications around certifications and those types of things, right? Or, you're trying to go and get up to speed for a particular subject. And I think, like for, back to the student and learning kind of thing, that could be, I have biology 101 exam tomorrow. Go make sure I'm ready to go and take the test, right?
Right, exactly. That's exactly right. So one of the lost arts, when you and I were in school, back in the farming days, of walking in the school uphill both ways, right? I clearly remember in college taking logical and critical thinking courses.
Yeah.
Clearly, we don't do that anymore, right? Yeah. Logical and critical thinking is something that sort of went away, but it's exactly the skill set that's needed right now. When you think about our ability and society's ability, I'm not going to get political here, I'm just going to make a blanket statement. Everybody asks different people different things. We come with our own biases. We come with our own questions. We come with our own judgment, right? Now, you take all those different and varied abilities, whether they're good, bad, or indifferent, and we start interacting with the language model, we're going to amplify some of that stuff.
Yeah.
So by not being able to ask proper questions, like, okay, when I was seeing patients, family patients, I used to use this analogy of taking out the trash. How many people have teenagers and you just say, go take out the trash, and the trash doesn't get taken out, right? Go take out the trash, it's important, trash doesn't get taken out. Or if they do it, they'll say, I did it, yeah, but it was on the wrong day, right? Family dynamics is all about communications. Systems family therapy is all about communications. If we have lost the art of how to communicate with each other, what makes us think that we're going to communicate with the LLMs?
Right.
Clearly?
Yeah.
And again, this is some of where you say I became this expert in tips and tricks. I think really what I really honed in on are my skills for logical critical thinking and communications.
Huh.
Teaching people how better to communicate with this thing that we don't always understand.
Yeah.
My next newsletter that's not been written, but I have the idea, is that in my town, we adopted a dog during COVID. She came to us as a 2-year-old, and in my town, there's a sculpture of 3 bears that are sitting out in front of a gas station.
Yeah.
And they're large statues. And this dog, who had never seen those bears before, or presumably never seen bears before, were walking up the sidewalk, and she stopped dead in her tracks and looked at him and really was trying to do the math. And you could see her brain trying to figure out what the heck that thing was. And there was this immediate fear of the unknown.
Yeah.
And I drove by that statue the other day, and I started thinking about AI. It's the same thing, because at CES right now, they're showing off robots. They're showing off full Android type robot things, right? That are going to be doing stuff for us. And there's all these movies out right now about, the LLMs and the androids coming after us. We have a fear of the unknown, just like my dog did seeing those bears for the first time.
Yeah.
Somehow she instinctively knew that bears were bad. Don't know how. It's not like she learned it in school,
Yeah.
right? But somehow she knew a bear was bad. And it took her a while to be able to walk past the bears, and now we walk past, it's no big deal. But for people, it's the same thing. We're looking at a bear. We're looking at something unknown.
Spiders.
Yeah, exactly. Some of us are like, oh, it's a bear, cool. And others are like, whoa, hold on a second, right? There's something deep within us instinctually that we have a fear of the unknown.
Yeah.
And I think that it's incumbent upon companies like Software One, as well as others, and me, to be able to help navigate people through these fears. Fear isn't bad, but being able to actually interact and understand with, that's where it's going to be. So truly, it's that combination of the technology and people.
Yeah.
That's where we are for the next 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, and then it's because you got me thinking, and I have a really a good friend who's still at IBM. He's a distinguished engineer, and he's kind of pulled into the AI dark side kind of thing, right? It's like, and some of the biases and how it's being used. So he's got an elderly mother who lives in the South. Not necessarily wealthy, and then she gets some of these robocalls now, right? And they pick up on the fact that she's elderly, right? That they know where she lives, the neighborhood, right? So that she's probably doesn't have the highest education, and they manipulate her and are able to take advantage of her and kind of spin the conversation to make her believe in some emergency, and then they can take advantage of her in some way. Right. Well,
okay, hold on. Not only that, but AI right now has the ability to take a 6-second audio clip of my voice right now, and that's enough to create a virtual Kevin voice to be able to then call my family. You see where it's going?
Yeah.
Right. So yes, and what you're talking about is security. And again, if you think about where companies are with security, this changes the game. The ability for like passwords, and we all got the thing about the notice from the U.S. government about don't trust two-factor authentication on text messaging.
Yeah.
There's a lot out there because of all the hacking that's going on. But the same thing is that we have a security industry that is lagging behind. AI is moving so quickly. Where is the security? Are we going to be looking at passkeys in the future? For family security, I've suggested to my own family that we have our own quote-unquote safe word to be able to verify. Right?
Yeah.
I think that society, as fast as this is evolving, we as society have a responsibility to stay ahead and be secure and be safe. Right? If you're working with a financial institution that doesn't have two-factor or multi-factor authentication, leave them.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, we have a responsibility here. And for the elderly and the vulnerable, we also have a responsibility to be able to help safeguard and secure them and teach them. Again, we're in a weird place when it comes to the overarching vulnerabilities and the dark side of what AI can do.
Yeah.
But I have chosen that I want to be part of that solution to help people, and I want to be able to guide people as opposed to shirk away from it. That's just how I operate. I mean, behind me, I'm looking at the image. I hope this comes through, but you can see those lighthouses. And as I'm talking to you, I'm like, why are there lighthouses behind me? And it's because I want to be that beacon. I want to be that beacon of hope and that beacon of light to be able to bring people toward safe AI, responsible AI, moving people through this into the next phases of where we're going to be, and thinking about my future family and them growing up and where they're going to be in the world. I want to be part of the solution here, not ushering in all the rogue AI that is. We do have the potential to be out there.
Yeah. Oh, I think that's kind of the challenge here as well. And for these models is if the dark side kind of takes over, right, then it's going to get killed, right? People are they're not going to engage anymore, and the trust is going to be gone, and you're going to see less and less involvement.
But the genie's already out of the bottle,
yeah.
Out of the bottle, or whatever analogy you want to use. So what's going to happen is AI right now is the buzz, right? And you mentioned the hype cycle. But I do predict that within 3 to 5 years, AI just sort of blends into the background and it just becomes part of our everyday.
Yeah.
And then people don't even realize what it is. We are in this shock phase of this is something new. This is a bear walking down the sidewalk. What the heck is it, right?
Yeah.
And all this resistance. But if you fast forward the clock a little bit here, we're not going to be having the same conversation that we're having now.
Yeah. All right. So that great transition. Just about time for us to wrap it up. So, you kind of gave your 3 to 5 years. Let's talk about that a little bit more. Where do you really? I mean, what's the next step here, right? Because now you got models coming out of the woodwork, right? Everyone's got their own different model. IBM's got Granite, which they've open sourced, which is really, really incredible from IBM, and they've kind of ingested all of like the legal language from the history of written history in the United States, so that you can, and all the medical stuff as well, I believe. So just a ton of really good information. So I kind of see certain models kind of focusing on certain sets of data and just being really kind of specific for certain kinds of prompting, right? How do you see it going?
Yeah, I do think that it's going to be more. It's going to be vertical and horizontal, right? We're going to have domain knowledge centers is what I believe will happen, and I think that's where the monetization will be around that. Because again, general is fine, but it's not going to give us the results that really are changing things, in a meaningful way. So I do believe that 2025 will be the year of agents and actions. Agents first and actions later, but agents to be able to be as companions. AI will be a companion to us, and then we can set up domain-specific AIs. Like I don't want to use a general LLM if I had a legal question. I do think that this is going to have job implications. I do think that there's going to be stresses, in society because of that. But again, I think all of this is sort of this short-term weirdness with any new technology and transformative technology. But when you think about it, I think that, if you mention lawyers, I think that the legal profession, they got a lot of bad press in the beginning because a couple of people used, ChatGPT to do their legal brief filings, and they were caught on that. Yeah. And then that kind of stung, right? But I do believe that it's now going to evolve so that will become the norm, right? Legal domain specific LLM.
Yeah.
Small language, large language, and all the different subsets. If you think about all the different subsets of society, conceivably there could be an LLM for all of that. I think it's wonderful that the LLMs are learning all that they can learn. But if you think about how many data points are being made every single day in the world, it's limitless. Like there's so much that we can learn from. But again, I think it's going to go back to smaller, focused, domain specific.
Interesting. And what professions do you see being threatened the most? Because I think lawyers are toast after this, right?
I think there's going to be a lot of pressure on the legal departments. I do believe that initially though there's going to be a lot of pressure on some frontline workers, on call centers, on cashiers, retail. I think there's going to be a lot of pressure on front end jobs. Back office jobs, I think organizations are still trying to figure out how to get ROI out of that. But front facing, I think there's going to be a lot of shifting in the industry.
Yeah, that's a great point too, because this has come up with me on a couple of other conversations where we have the longshoreman strike on the East Coast, which has shut down a couple ports in the last few months. And one of the things that they're griping about is the introduction of automation, right? So if you go look at some of the ports in Asia, China, and Japan, they're almost entirely automated at this point. Right. So there's no people standing under shipping containers anymore, running the crane, right? They actually are sitting across the street in a building running a virtual crane, and all of the movement of vehicles and whatnot are all being done by AI at this point. So the longshoremen see that as a threat to them in their employment, right? Which potentially it is, but for me, it's like, well, this is an opportunity, right? This is where you guys get. All that stuff still needs to be maintained. It still needs to be trained, right? It still needs to be run and managed. It's not like all of that just goes away. It's just that you shift kind of into a different type of interaction with the things that you're running, right? And I think that's a big part of the thing that people need to kind of get, is that it's not necessarily that, you're still going to be putting nails into wood to frame a house, right? But, the design of that home and where all of those things go is going to be, done. You're not going to have a draftsman sitting at a table, trying to make sure that everything's up to code, right?
Look at it this way. Whenever there's a large implementation of a new technology, there's always a shift in the market. And it doesn't necessarily mean full-blown elimination permanently of roles. It just means there's a shifting in the roles and a shifting in the skill set. And I think our education system needs to react faster. I mentioned logical and critical thinking. Our education system needs to be able to support that. We need to be forward-looking. I just read an article about Saudi Arabia, who's looking at their Vision 2030, when they're bringing in, they're calling it the quantum vision of the future, and how it starts with education and society to be able to support that future that's at 2030. It's interesting, right?
Yeah.
But when you talk about where we are today, it's about enabling and helping and ushering all this stuff in a different, meaningful way. This isn't just about fear of job replacement. Sure, that's going to happen in some industries, but it's also about the opportunities that will be created because of it. And that's something that we have to look at.
Yes.
Highly skilled workers are still going to be sought after, right? We still have this. So again, I think there's a little bit of a sky is falling approach, to there's fear out there, but there's also, wherever there's misunderstanding, there's fear.
Yeah.
So the more that we talk about it, the more that, we have platforms like this where we can actually have engaging conversation and to be able to really talk about the issues that people are facing, the better it's going to be.
Yeah, I totally agree. So with that, thank you very much for joining. It's been a great conversation. We're going to have to do it again in a couple months just to kind of get caught up and see where things are kind of panning out. So I'm looking forward to that as well. And you've given me some great ideas, and I hope some other people gain from this as well. We'll throw a connection to the newsletter down in the description here. And, I just want to, again, say, Software One is really, from my time there, was really a leader in getting stuff out there. I congratulate them on kind of taking that chance, them listening or reading your 17-page proposal and getting on the Copilot bandwagon. I think that, they've demonstrated some really good leadership there. So it's really good to see them kind of in that position, which has been good.
Yeah, no, I'm really proud to be part of Software One. The last thing I'll say, I'll close with this. We talked about the newsletter a couple of different times. My goal for the newsletter is to, and it literally says it at the bottom, is to give you some mental food to chew on, right? You're not always going to agree with everything I write, but you're not supposed to agree with everything you write. But I want to have dialogue and encourage dialogue. I raise some interesting and interesting topics and sometimes controversial topics because, again, this is how we usher in not just the age of AI, but looking at beyond. It's through dialogue, it's through engagement, it's through, like you said, platforms like this. So thanks for having me. I've had fun. This has been great.
All right. Thanks, Kevin.
All right. Thank you.